Hello. Well, today's Sunday, July 7th, and we're going to go out on an Uber Eats run today for about an hour, hour and a half, and we're going to talk about the carbon dioxide, the CO2 industry. I'm going to tell you about a lot of things that you've probably never heard about and are not aware of, things that are going on right now that the people that are doing them like to keep a low profile. So let me turn on the app for the Uber Eats and we'll see where that takes us. People have been experimenting and playing around with compressed gases for the longest time. In the 1700s, Boyles and Charles and one other guy came up with the gas laws, saying that basically if you put a gas under enough pressure, if you lower the temperature enough and you contain it in a high pressure steel container, that it will liquefy and remain liquid as long as the pressure and temperature is remain constant. So since the 1700s, people have been experimenting with the gases, discovering that when you heat the gas, the pressure increases. When you lower it, the pressure decreases, and just things like that. And it was a breakthrough for the time. So it took industry a little bit of time to realize that, hey, we can work with this. There's some industrial applications that we could apply this to and make money off of. And one of the first companies that did that was Coca-Cola. So Coca-Cola has been around for about 120 years. And their very first formula was they came up with the syrup and then figured out a way to put carbon dioxide inside the drink. And it's the carbon dioxide that gives it the fizz. So what they would do is they would get a barrel, 10-gallon, 20-gallon barrel, it was called a rocker. They would put their mix inside there, and then they would inject carbon dioxide into the mix and then rock the barrel back and forth to get the carbon dioxide into the solution of their syrup mix, Coca-Cola. And by the time they were done, they had a finished drink Coca-Cola, and it became widely popular. So that was one of the first carbonated drinks. And then a lot of other companies followed and took their lead and started making carbonated drinks themselves. So that was the very first application where people would buy carbon dioxide, liquid carbon dioxide, and use it for a commercial purpose. And we'll get into that a little bit more after we get to Starbucks and wait for our first Uber Eats order to come in. So I know it goes without saying that everybody's heard of carbon dioxide and global warming and climate change and carbon dioxide being the big culprit, and everybody's trying to get carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. And of course the focus has been on automobiles emitting carbon dioxide. What happens anytime you burn petrochemical coal? Carbon dioxide is released. And it didn't take long for industry, back 100, 120 years ago, it didn't take long for industry to realize that they could make money selling liquid carbon dioxide. So what they do is they set up plants where they would burn oil and then collect the gases, collect the carbon dioxide gas. They would clean it up a little bit through a process, purify it, and then sell the liquid carbon dioxide to different industrial uses. One of the industrial uses I mentioned was Coca-Cola. Another one is Frito-Lay. When Frito-Lay mixes up their batch of, I don't know what you would call it, mash, the shearing forces of the mixers create a lot of heat, and the material starts cooking because of that shearing heat while they're mixing it. So what they do is they inject carbon dioxide into the mix. Carbon dioxide, once you get it out of its liquid form and put it under atmospheric pressure, it drops down to about minus 64 degrees Fahrenheit. So they would inject that into their mix, cool the mix down, and then it would also give the Fritos its texture and its taste to some extent. But mostly carbon dioxide is tasteless and odorless. So things progress from there. So they start, after the oil plants, they discover that, hey, we're building refineries now, and there's a certain portion of a refinery that makes carbon dioxide, exhausts carbon dioxide, over 1,000 tons a day. That's a lot. And it didn't take long for companies to figure that, hey, we could draw that carbon dioxide from the refineries, compress it, clean it up, and then sell it. The very opposite of what we're trying to do is getting carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. Here people are collecting carbon dioxide to sell. So that went on, that's still going on today. And I'll tell you some of the uses for this large scale, and it was large scale going on now, large scale carbon dioxide production, where the refineries are releasing over 1,000 tons a day of CO2. I worked in a carbon dioxide plant from 1980 to 1990. I have some insight into the carbon dioxide business, how it's manufactured and how it's sold and who it's sold to, and how the industry likes to keep a low profile because the focus has been on getting carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. And here, companies are profiting by selling carbon dioxide. Who would have known? We've all heard of the tax credits they want to give to carbon dioxide producers, charging them for how much carbon dioxide they put in the atmosphere. And then the higher the tax, the more incentive they would have to lower their emissions. Maybe that'll happen someday, maybe not. But the way it is now, there's no such system in place, and carbon dioxide is being released not only by cars, but by industry. And in fact, it's not only industry, is that there's a company that sells little carbon dioxide plants for people that don't want to buy from industrial providers. They just need a little bit. And what these little machines do is they burn a little kerosene or they burn a little natural gas. They collect the carbon dioxide, liquefy it, purify it, and then put it in their product, whether it's fire extinguishers. Hey, beer uses it now. Instead of letting things ferment the right amount of time, they cheat a little bit, and they'll put a little bit of alcohol and carbon dioxide into the brew, before it's fully fermented, and then sell it as finished beer. So I'm going to wait for the order to come in from Uber Eats, and I'll continue my discussion in just a moment. Well, it's 6:15 in the morning, still haven't gotten an Uber Eats order, and we're waiting patiently. So I'll talk a little bit more about my experience in the carbon dioxide industry. Like I said, I worked in there from 1980 to 1990, and I got into the carbon dioxide plant pretty much soon after it opened. And what happens is refineries are doing their thing, making gasoline, and sometimes they want to get the very last drop of gasoline out of their oil. And the way they do that is they install a hydrocracker unit in their refinery. And it's from this hydrocracker unit that the CO2 comes from. So from the refinery, the CO2 comes to the CO2 plant. It's about 70% carbon dioxide and 30% hydrocarbons. And what the CO2 plant does is they compress it with, I'm trying to give you a scale of just how large this operation is. But 1,500 horsepower motors, the size of a minivan with 30-inch compressors with 7-inch valves, compressing the gas from atmospheric pressure up to 300 pounds per square inch. And on the other side, we were also compressing ammonia, and that's what we used as the coolant. We would compress that, liquefy that, and of course when you relieve the pressure, according to the gas laws, the temperature drops. And we would use the ammonia as a refrigerant, and that refrigerant would liquefy the carbon dioxide. So it's not only, so what the carbon dioxide companies do is when they find out these refineries are putting in a hydrocracker, they all make a bid for it, saying, hey, we'll purchase this amount of carbon dioxide for such and such a lease, 10 years, 20 years, come to a deal and sign a contract, and then the carbon dioxide company will build a plant and take advantage of that carbon dioxide, liquefy it, purify it, and then sell it. They would sell at least 900 tons a day. And you might be asking, well, geez, you know, we got carbon dioxide in the air. Why don't we just liquefy that, get that out of our atmosphere, and, you know, solve a very big problem that we're having right now? But the problem is that there's only 0.04% carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. It's a minuscule amount, just parts per million, small parts per million of carbon dioxide, 0.04%. And there's no way that a company could be profitable using all of that electricity to compress the gas, probably quadrupling the size of the plant. Our plant sat on 5 acres of land, quadrupling the size of the plant, trying to suss out that 0.04% of carbon dioxide. It just isn't going to happen. There's other ways of getting carbon dioxide out of the air. They're experimenting with that now. It's pretty small scale. I'm pretty sure it's not going to be viable, but there is some solutions to getting some of this carbon dioxide that these manufacturers make and sell and profit by, and getting that out of our atmosphere. And I'll tell you that in a little bit. Well, we got an order for Uber Eats. We have to go 4 miles, and they're paying $7 to do that. So I decided to take the order. I'm headed off to a Starbucks. Apparently somebody wants their morning coffee, and we'll get that to them as quickly as I can. I've got a red light here that just doesn't want to seem to change. There's no traffic around. I think I'm gonna go. So, the CO2 plants. I was talking about how...
Make a slide left turn on North State Street.
How our plant made 900 tons of CO2 a day, and we would ship it out in 18-wheeler trucks, 40,000 pounds at a time. And we'd get about 7 or 8 of these trucks in a day. We'd load them up, send them on their way. And we also had a railroad station at our plant where we could load 3 railroad cars full a day. And we normally did that a day. So we were getting rid of a lot of carbon dioxide. And the word was from management.
Just ahead, make a sharp left turn on Ohio Street using the upcoming left lane. Just ahead, make a sharp left turn on Ohio Street using the upcoming left lane.
So the word
using
was
the left lane, make a sharp left turn on Ohio Street.
So the word was for management to produce. And if you weren't producing, you were in a lot of trouble. And the way our CO2
Just
plant...
ahead, keep right onto Interstate 5 South.
The way our CO2 plant was set up, there were 4 workers. There were 3 operators, I was an operator, and a manager. And we each took a shift. So we each had an 8-hour shift.
Keep right onto Interstate 5 South.
And then during the summer, that was our busy season. We would work every day, 8 hours a day, and if somebody went on vacation or somebody was sick, we would work 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. It was grueling. And there was no room for error. So if something broke down, you had to know how to fix it. There was nobody else around but yourself, and get production back up. So that's what my typical day looked like working for the CO2 plant. I won't name its name. There's only about 3 of them nationwide.
Take right exit 252 towards Samish Way, West Wash University.
There's only about 3 of them nationwide now, liquefying carbon dioxide. And let me get this order squared away, and I'll get into it a little bit more with you. Thank you. So we made our first Uber Eats delivery. Just a girl that wanted a cup of coffee. So anyhow, the semi-trucks would come in, we'd load them up with 40,000 pounds of carbon dioxide, and then they would take off into the world and deliver it to different places. They would deliver it to fire extinguisher companies. Like I say, Frito-Lay. They would deliver it to Coca-Cola. And you know, when you go to the supermarket and you buy some dry ice to keep something cold, to freeze something, you have to wonder where that dry ice came from. And chances are, if you're in Washington State, it came from our carbon dioxide plant. So you're adding to the carbon dioxide problem. You're making these companies profit by buying their CO2. That CO2 gets released into the atmosphere, and it's hurting our environment. So, and then the rail cars, they would just go out to big depots. They would go up to Canada. They would go all over the country delivering carbon dioxide. And there was probably a dozen of these plants like ours scattered throughout the country. So that's a lot of carbon dioxide. 900 tons per plant, a dozen plants, a lot of CO2. And so I'm going to tell you next about the biggest use of carbon dioxide. They don't do it anymore, and they should. And there should be tax incentives for companies to use liquefied carbon dioxide in this manner. It would solve so many problems, and I just wanted to make you aware of it. So we're going to turn Uber Eats back on, see if any orders come in, and I'll get back to you after my next delivery. So like I said, I worked in the carbon dioxide industry from 1980 to 1990. And one of the earliest uses of the CO2 from our plant was a large-scale use. Oh, they used so much carbon dioxide, it was crazy. In the Permian Basin, everybody knows the Permian Basin. There's a lot of oil down there, but it's all trapped in rock and shale. And everybody's heard of hydrocracking, or not hydrocracking, but fracking to get the oil out. And everybody believes that fracking is a bad thing. It's polluting the water, and it's causing many earthquakes. But back in the 1980s, 1980 to 1985, they used to frack these wells with carbon dioxide. They would get a couple of carbon dioxide trucks, each carrying 40,000 pounds of carbon dioxide. They would pull up to the wellhead, hook up their discharge line to the well, and just pull the valve and unload a truckload of carbon dioxide directly into that well, probably empty it out in a couple of minutes, 40,000 pounds right down the pipe, right down into the layer of oil. And when that carbon dioxide liquid heated up, it expanded to great pressures, enough to crack the shale and release the oil. So this was great. It made the oil a little bit less viscous. The oil companies could pump the oil out and make a profit. And the best part is the carbon dioxide stayed in the well. It was sequestered. We got rid of 80,000 pounds of carbon dioxide after each one of these fracking operations. And just imagine how many fracking operations have been going on, since they discovered fracking. If we could do all the fracking with carbon dioxide instead of using the witch's brew that they use now of water and chemicals added to it, we could get rid of a lot of carbon dioxide. Oh, just tons and tons and tons. It would be wonderful. So what could we do about it? let me go back to Uber Eats and I'll get right back to you. So, like I was saying before, we pump 40,000, 80,000 pounds of CO2 directly into a well. That CO2 is sequestered, never going to come back out into the atmosphere again, and we've slowed down the amount of CO2 we're putting in the atmosphere. So what I propose is that legislators are promising or are thinking about issuing taxing carbon dioxide emissions. The more carbon dioxide you emit, the higher the tax. And so the legislature believes that people paying high tax for all this carbon dioxide they're releasing is going to give them the impetus to lower their carbon dioxide to pay less tax. But what they also ought to be doing is they should ban oil fracking with water and the chemicals that's polluting everything. Go back to fracking with carbon dioxide, and I guess they do it with liquid nitrogen too. But go back to sequestering these wells with carbon dioxide, make it a tax break, just like they do with solar panels, just like they do with electric vehicles. You buy an electric vehicle, you get a tax break. You buy solar panels, you get a tax break. If you frack your well with carbon dioxide, you get a tax break. Make it profitable again for the oil companies to be able to frack with carbon dioxide. That would get rid of so much carbon dioxide. It would be incredible. So your job in the future is to pass what I'm telling you along to somebody else, and maybe it'll get traction. Maybe some legislation will be put up in the House or in Congress, and maybe it'll pass. It'll solve our oil crisis because we're not fracking right now because of all the problems with the pollutants in the water fracking. So we're not fracking, we're not getting any oil, and we're not getting any CO2. If we crack CO2, we get oil, and we sequester the carbon dioxide. It's a win-win. I don't know why it takes me to realize the benefits of fracking with carbon dioxide and why we should be doing it all the time. Oh, it would solve so many problems. So this is Uber Philosopher. I'm done with my carbon dioxide lecture. There's really not much more to say about it. And I will talk to you next time. So thank you for watching. Hit the subscribe button if you'd like. Hit the bell for future notifications. And we'll see you next time. Thank you very much.